Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hi, David. Nice to see you today.
Likewise. And welcome, Rose, too.
Yeah. Welcome, listeners. This is episode 252. And we have a very special guest, Rose Marketich. And Rose is offered to do some personal work with me and David. I hope it works out great for you, Rose. And it's kind of a sad situation.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'll repeat it again, but I'm just so excited to be here. Like I said, it feels sort of surreal to be here with the two of you. I listen to the podcasts weekly. I just love them. And the two of you just have this chemistry together. You really kind of bring it to life. And it's just, and I actually got to hear the hello, Rhonda, live. I mean, this is so exciting. So I appreciate this. And I appreciate your generosity to sort of be able to kind of listen and support. So this is just an honor. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, we really appreciate your sharing your personal issue in this era of the last year, especially when so many people have been struck with losses of loved ones due to COVID. It's been kind of the year of grief and sadness and anxiety. And although your situation is not COVID related, I think all of our listeners will be very moved and very, very grateful to share your issue with your dad.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we dive in, why don't I read an endorsement about another couple of episodes we did on personal work. And that was episode 241, about 10 episodes away. That was about Elizabeth, when Elizabeth wrote that she was tired of being terrified and she wanted peace. And somebody wrote to us, Madeline wrote, "What a wonderfully powerful and instructive podcast. I have been hesitant to use some of the techniques and methods, although I've been studying team for some time. After this podcast, my fears about trying it out on my patients seemed to melt away. It was probably all the shared exposure with Elizabeth. I loved the cognitive flooding David and Jill did, and the way you each explained your different techniques. The fluidity between your styles as therapists was inspiring. It also made me less fearful because I saw there's not only one right answer. Elizabeth, thank you for your courage and vulnerability as a patient and as a therapist. I too grapple with these same issues. You've helped so many of us in so many ways, and for free, just like you wanted."
Well, thank you for that wonderful email, and all of you who send in so many questions and wonderful comments. There's the occasional criticism too, and it's all good. It's all provides opportunity for us to learn and grow and improve the quality of the podcasts that we bring to you each week. Let's dive right in, and I'll review your brief mood survey and the first part of your daily mood log, which will also appear in the show notes, and then we can move right into the empathy portion and talk about what's happening. But the brief mood survey, your depression score was 5 out of 20, indicating just a mild level of depression. No suicidal urges. The anxiety was also 5, again, a mild level. And the anger was a 3 out of 20, a mild level of anger, but still very significant. perhaps more powerful was the happiness scale. We're now using a 5-item happiness scale that goes from 0 to 20, just like the depression score goes from 0 to 20, but this is obviously going in the opposite direction where a 0 is not happy at all, and 20 is the highest happiness a human being can have, and the happiness score is only 11 out of 20, which indicates that although you're only mildly depressed, there's really no real strong levels of happiness for you right now in any area. The one thing that you said was a lot was hopeful and optimistic, but everything else is only moderately, like happiness and worthwhileness and motivation and feeling pleasure and satisfaction in life, and none of them are up in the extremely range, which is where we'd like to see them. Your relationship with your husband, the marital satisfaction score is 28 out of 30, which is exceptionally a high. A 30 would be a perfect score, but anything above 27 is pretty tremendously high score. And then on the daily mood log, the upsetting event was a phone call with Mother on Saturday morning at 9 in the morning, and she provided me with the updates on my father's oncology visit. And your scores here are way higher when you're focusing on that particular moment. And the feelings of sadness and feeling sad and down and unhappy and depressed were 100, the highest a human being can have. And the feelings of anxiety, worry, and fear were also 100%. And the guilt is 80%. The feelings of incompetence is 70%. Feeling lonely and alone is 80%. Feeling hopeless, discouraged, pessimistic, and despairing is 90%, and defeated is 70%. So those are just really, really way up there. And then your negative thoughts. Number one, he's going to die. My father is going to die, and we're running out of time. So sad to read that and to hear about this situation, and you believe that 100%. And he's going to miss out on important memories with his grandchildren, 100. The cancer will accelerate and spread, and we won't be able to stop it, 100. And I can't take on more and have no space in my life to grieve, 90%. The chemo won't be helpful and will only get him sicker. It's just too great of a risk, 100%. And we have 5 more negative thoughts. It's not fair that he's sick and may die at the age of only 70 years. It's 100. I should be stronger and shouldn't fall apart when I get news like this, 90%. We'll be alone, and my kids will grow up with one grandparent present in their life, 100%. I should have visited more and spent more time with him, 80%. And finally, my problems are not as great as others suffering, and I should be grateful for the time I have, at 80%. Very, very sad to hear that, Rose, and we've done our testing. We'll test again at the end of the session to see how you're feeling at that point. And now we're going to do some empathy, and then after that we'll get into the A of assessment of resistance, and then M equals methods. And so I'll turn it over to you, Rhonda, to take the lead on empathy.
Hey, Rose, can you tell us about what it is that you're going through? I think we can kind of guess a little bit from your negative thoughts, but fill us in the details.
Yeah. This was like a moment in time. It was feeling the grief, the sadness, the depression, anxiety fairly acutely. My dad, I think in a nutshell, so my dad has had cancer previously, I think 2014, so years ago, or not so long ago, and he had renal cancer. And he underwent a major surgery. It was quite extensive, and they removed one of his kidneys. And then when they opened him up, they kind of found all these other things going on that they actually, it was sort of like a miracle that they caught it in that way. They found some issues around the spleen. And so they removed some of these things that they found that could have been cancerous, or I don't know. And there was just more complications in, his procedure than they had imagined. And, but, in summary, he has a long history of health issues. He's, I think, had over 12 surgeries in his life or something. He's had open heart surgery. He's had a tumor removed in his bone. He's had multiple knee surgeries. So many different. And so he's because he had open heart surgery, he's on Coumadin, blood thinner, and, he has all these kind of things that predispose him to just to be kind of more vulnerable, I think, in regards to his health. And so he kind of has this history of, we call him the cat with 9 lives, because he's had I think we're kind of at the 8th, right? Or almost there at the end. And so he's had many kind of, situations with his health that, we've been really lucky. We've been able to catch it and intervene. My mom is an RN. So she's sort of really always been able to manage and I think advocate for him in the medical system, which I found is just incredibly important, and finding things that maybe weren't detected. And so kind of case managing, I would say. So, so she's been really, I would say done her due diligence, and we've really kind of, tried to keep, monitoring things as best as possible. But then he kind of started getting sick last September during the pandemic, and he went and he was admitted and inpatient, and he was just having these symptoms of GI, vomiting and really ill. And, on a couple of occasions, and they ran scans and didn't find anything. And so he was in the hospital once in September and then once again in February, in a lot of pain, but they really weren't able to diagnose what exactly it was. And then finally it kind of culminated in March when he was in one of those, I guess, trips to the hospital again, and that he was having those symptoms. And so they operated on him, and they operated on him for a hernia that he had. And what they ended up finding was a tumor that was kind of puncturing the hernia, and that's what was causing him pain. And so they removed the tumor in his abdomen, and to their best knowledge, removed what they could of what they thought were the cancers or the cells around that, and tested it, and then found that it was a different type of cancer, liposarcoma, which is a cancer in the fat cells. And so that had kind of been that sort of was the finding, right? And we didn't know much about that. So since then, we found that I think with more testing with the right type of CT or scan that they can kind of do to flush out the fluids in the body to be able to detect that, they found more tumors in his back. There's a couple
in his back.
In his back, yeah. So it had spread now. And so I think what we found, and my mom was explaining to me on this oncology visit, was sort of putting the pieces together of this timeline of we knew there was something going on, but we weren't able to identify it or really, react to it. And so it grew and it had spread. So at that point, he had been diagnosed with that, and at stage 3. And so this is an aggressive type of cancer that spreads pretty rapidly. And the way of treatment is either through surgery, radiation, and, those are pretty much the primary ways that these physicians approach it. But he can't have any more surgeries because of his history. He's had so many in the past. He just can't really withstand it anymore, the anesthesia and all that. So really, I mean, I think this is where this moment in time was really frightening for me. It was like sort of like we lost hope. That we could kind of really get rid of this and really and just keep him.
Yeah.
So it's really, really emotional for me.
I can see the tears now, and I feel so sad to hear what you're saying, and how anxiety provoking too it must be, and just like my heart goes out to you, and all I can say of a positive nature is that your father's very lucky to have such a loving daughter and family. But,
Rose, it sounds like your dad has really been suffering so much with his health since 2014, first with renal cancer and having one of his kidneys removed, and then finding more cancer. And then you described this long history of health issues, open heart surgery and another tumor removed from his bone, and knee surgeries, and then being on Coumadin. And, you kind of made a joke that said he's a cat with 9 lives.
Yeah.
But kind of worried this might be his 8th one.
Yeah.
The professor I loved the most at Stanford Medical School, I was a horrible medical student, but there was one wonderful person, the head of outpatient medicine, who I really admired. And even after he retired and we moved to Philadelphia, my wife and I would always visit him, Alan Barber, when we'd come out to California for vacation to see my wife's folks out here. And he too he was the nicest guy in the world, but he had all of these cancers, and the same kind of thing, and it was so sad. And I've sometimes wondered if exceptionally nice people are more prone to cancer. It's probably a loony, ridiculous theory, but how is your dad, and how is he taking to all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, so when I wrote this daily mood log, it was before I'd visited them for the Memorial Day weekend, which was really helpful for me to be able to see him, and to it was great because he was still really active, and he's really trying. I mean, it's reckoning with what you have left, and he's just really trying to, I think, just be present and live his last, days, months, or whatever, in a way that feels the most fulfilling and meaningful to him, like keeping himself busy doing the things he loves, like the gardening. He loves golfing. He has a whole, community of friends, and keeping active, I think, has been really helpful for him. And then spending time with the grandkids, that was just really joyous for all of us to watch. And, the pandemic has also impacted how this grieving process has been for me, with the loss of time, and sort of, in the last year, we've seen him twice. And that was due to the shelter in place, we couldn't really do that much. And so it was and I have a 2-year-old son and a 5-year-old son, 5.5. And so, he really hasn't seen the 2-year-old is half of his life, just saw him a couple times during that year. And so it was really a wonderful experience to go and to be there as a family and connect, and for them, both my parents, to really be able to enjoy the children and just see how much they've grown and kind of how crazy they are. They're really active. And really.
Those are fun ages for sure.
Yes. They're very spunky. And he's just learning to talk. So he's just, he's kind of like this little just life of the party type of thing. And my dad has a really just strong connection with my kids too. I think at that age, he's just really like tends to like that. I think he's just more like kindred in that way, his spirit of being with young children. And that was just really meaningful. So what I had noticed is that he was more present like during this visit, because normally he might be busy or like, with his things and, or maybe on his iPad or whatever it is, but he really kind of took the time to be present and have, those moments. And so, on one hand, I see him doing pretty well, which is like, which was helpful for me in terms of the hope and sort of like kind of reducing some of the intensity of those negative feelings. And from what I hear too, he's just he's told friends and, I'm happy with where I'm at in my life. I've seen my children grow up and, have lovely grandchildren and what I've accomplished here. And I think he has good, relationships with the people that are important to him. And so he's, he was kind of like, if this is where I'm at, this is a good place. I've got a lot of wonderful things. And I think it's also prompted my parents to, my dad comes from a small village out of an area called Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is like bordering Croatia in Eastern Europe. And he kind of grew up very poor and came from poverty, the former Soviet, being in a place like that. He grew up with just, with challenges, I guess. And, he wasn't, so his family is really important to him. His family back home is what he says. Mm-hmm. And so, and so they're Catholic. It's really just kind of like the center of the culture where he comes from. So they're really devout Catholics. And so, his family his sisters have started to kind of tell him, you need to do this with the priest and you need to kind of, make these certain arrangements. And it's also, I think, motivated he and my mom to maybe have to be married under the church, which they hadn't done back in the 80s when they kind of married and had me in the first place long ago. So, I think it's in some respects, it's really connected to him I think it has connected me also. I mean, our whole family, we're all kind of feeling more connected. That's, kind of what the positive thing is, that grief can these circumstances can pull people apart or really bring them closer. And so, in terms of how he's doing, I think he's actually doing fairly well. But he had started his chemo this week or last week. I think, it was last week. So that's kind of going to change things, and we don't know how that's going to impact him. And because of his pre-existing conditions and all of that, his just general health, that's where I'm feeling more pessimistic about what that's going to do. And there's really the thing about chemo is that it's only 20% effective, which is why I was really kind of critical or really thinking more pessimistically about like the likelihood of this helping. This is not sort of the type of cancer, I guess, that this is sort of the first place to go. So this was all kind of pre the chemo. And so we don't know how that's going to change, but their hope and his hope is that, I could at least decelerate the growth and just maintain it and not have it spread.
But your concern is there might be side effects from the chemo which outweigh the beneficial effects, which seem to be fairly small. So I can understand that. During my internship, I had a patient at Highland Hospital who was diagnosed with a rare thing called malignant reticulosis, and one of my professors at Stanford actually made the diagnosis. We did surgery, and the pathologist couldn't identify it. So I sent it to Dr. Dorfman at Stanford, who was world's leading lymph guy, and then he called back and said it was malignant reticulosis, the 8th case in the world, and that there was no treatment that would be effective, and that all chemotherapy would have no value to him. And so I put that in the notes, and then I had to go to a new rotation. Sure enough, they treated him with chemotherapy, which saddened me. I guess they felt they had to do something, but in that case, probably doing nothing would have been preferable, because as you point out, the coming together, the love that you have and that you all have for each other could be, and still can be, if it isn't such a good deal with the chemotherapy, the main focus. It's just so sad, and he's been up against so much, and you've all been up against so much. But it sounds like you're all handling it super well. Where do they live?
They live in San Diego. So I'm up here in the Bay Area, and they're in Southern California.
So you were all able just to fly down there?
Yeah, the first flight. I don't know, 2 years. So we were able to fly down to visit.
And you're all vaccinated?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Wow, Rose, you've described such a gracious man, the way you've described how he's reckoning with what he's doing and with what he's coping with, and how he's really committed to living in the present moment and, doing things that he loves to do, like, gardening and golfing and hanging out with his friends. And it's so sad. There's so many consequences to COVID that are unforeseen. Like, probably in the last 2 years, you would have seen him more frequently than you have since COVID.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little harder, because you guys have been missing each other so much. Like you said, your son is 2 years old, so a whole year of his life, he hasn't seen your dad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true.
Yeah, I think it's really awesome that he's happy where he is in his life, because I think so many people, when they reach sort of the end of their life there, they have so many regrets.
Yeah.
But it's really admirable that your dad is, you described him as kind of content with where he is. And he has good relationships with people.
Yeah.
With your mom and with you. And do you have any siblings?
Oh, yeah, I do. I have 2 siblings, 2 younger brothers, age, I think, 34 and 30. And so, they live in San Diego, so they see him, and they've been able to spend time, and it's hard for them. And I think the distance impacts some of the processing. I think, for me, we kind of understood it was like happening, I think back in April is when he got the diagnosis, and it was really upsetting, but we weren't really clear about those specifics. And then I think going back and visiting in May and hearing more of this information was upsetting. And so, my brothers have, they live there, so they've been able to kind of see, and they're working, so they're kind of busy, but it's also hard for them to kind of let go of their dad. And it's sort of like this brain has a hard time of holding these 2 opposing concepts of seeing him and what seems to be good health, and also knowing that he has a pretty major cancer can be kind of really confusing, I think, maybe sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned, too, that this cancer is aggressive, so maybe the time course you heard from the oncologist is not that long, or?
Yeah, we really don't know. And that's kind of, I think they haven't really given a timeline or really that trajectory. And so, and, we know that COVID, likely added some factors to this whole process, because, unfortunately, the medical systems are just so over inundated with just what's happening. And that, this has been I think during his first few visits, we couldn't be there. My mom couldn't be there because of COVID and those restrictions. And so made it more challenging. But yeah, it's just, we don't really have a lot of clear information, but, he started his chemo recently, and this is something that he needs to be on for like the rest of his life. And it's quite expensive too. It's like very expensive out of pocket.
Does that anger you?
It saddens me. It really kind of saddens me that this kind of access to care and to help is, I mean, you know, what would you do if you didn't have the resources, right? And this is the way we are kind of oppressed in our systems, which is heartbreaking. I mean, it's $3,000 a month. Like, that's
horrible. It saddens and angers me.
Yeah. It's just, it's kind of like robbing.
Yeah, it is.
Robbing people of living.
Yeah, it is. Your money or your life. It's,
God, that's actually shocking. It's shocking to hear it could be so expensive. $3,000 a month.
A month.
Wow.
Like, it's like a mortgage for, you know, that it's just, it's incredible. It's just, our systems are just not set up in a way that's really, I think, providing access.
I've been an advocate of national health insurance for years and years, and that's why I treat everyone for free. I mean, everyone can't afford to do that, but just something about the idea of charging people for health care or mental health care or something there's something disturbing to me about that, and it just drives up the price of health care. There's a conflict of interest between health and private enterprise, you know, free, you know, or you know, money-based, you know, activities. Because if you're, you know, trying to deliver healthcare, you want it to be as cheap as possible for everybody and as accessible for everybody. And then if the goal is making money, then the goal is to drive the price up as far as possible. And it's just disturbing to me. It's creates a lot of anger that a lot of people can't see this, and it's all got to be free enterprise, and we don't want any national health insurance. And I think it's a huge mistake. But at any rate, you've been feeling just horrible, you know, the worst possible depression and anxiety and guilt. We'll have to look at the guilt and the feeling of incompetence to see what that's all about, and feeling lonely and alone and pretty hopeless and frustrated. How are those feelings now? I know, you know, when you first talked to the oncologist and you were referring to that on your daily mood log, those feelings were about as high as a human being can have. And are they still at that level, or do they fluctuate, or what's that been for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, no. That was like an acute moment for sure. I think it was very overwhelming. All the information was hitting me really hard. They aren't as high now. I mean, I think I said after the visit, that was really helped reduce some of the anxiety of just being able to see him feeling joy and feeling positive emotions in his day to day, that without that suffering, right? You know, that was really helpful. And so, I mean, I would say that my depression and sadness is probably ranges at like, 50, 60, because I, day to day, I mean, I'm not thinking about it. I'm, not, it's there. I have moments that like grief sort of is triggered in many various ways. And, as you kind of go through the process, you really find that, you learn more about what is triggering, but each time you kind of unpack that, it's, makes sense, right? It's part of the loss. Like I have moments with my children and I have these thoughts that like, he won't be here to see these things, or, at some point this is, he's going to miss these opportunities. And that's when it becomes more elevated when I think about that. We kind of FaceTime regularly which is helpful for me because then I could see him. But I know he tells me what I want to hear. Like, I'm doing fine. I'm a little tired from the chemo. And it's like, okay, I probably should start measuring it. Are you like at a 7 tired? And then that like add on 4. I don't know. But for the most part, I could see him, and that helps, with just saying, okay, you're here. That really helps, I think, ground me and my family, my sons. The anxiety that fluctuates because there's just the piece of the unknown we just don't know, right? That's I think some of the more difficult emotions to kind of sit with, because there's just so much out of our hands. And like David, you said that there's this pros and cons of treatment or no treatment, which one is, the lesser of the two worst situations, I suppose. And it's really kind of like not a win-win, but, in either way. But so that's kind of where I think some of the anxiety comes up when I start to think about, how is this going to impact him? I think that's where some of my anxiety kind of lives now, is that, if this chemo reduces his energy levels and he's not capable of doing the things he loves day to day, that's going to impact his mental health. Like he's going to feel depressed, I imagine. And that's not, it's just, your health, right? Like really, essentially that's all, it comes down to. That's the most important thing. And then the guilt comes up when I think about which happens with grief, of course, of the time I wish I would have, I should have visited more. I should have spent more time. We live here in the Bay Area. And so we've, over the years have vacillated between, do we live here or do we live in San Diego? And with the pandemic, that has really shifted a lot of that with the remote working and all of that, and perhaps makes that possible. And yet there's like some hesitancy and anxiety about doing something like that. Just, picking up everything and moving my whole family. But that also, either way I look at it, I do feel guilty that I could have spent more time. And then I also feel guilt that, I have thoughts that I should move there now that I have this information. And
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if I don't, then I feel guilty about not prioritizing my family, maybe.
Sure. So guilt about moving to the Bay Area and not being with them, and guilt about not having spent more time and visited more, and then guilt about maybe we should move back to San Diego now. And then you mentioned that he's saying I'm okay, just a little tired, and saying, trying to put a positive spin on things, and that you're really afraid that, if the chemo reduces his activity, then he'll get more depressed because he loves, his activity and the many things that he does. All very valid concerns. And then when you've talked to him, I didn't hear quite what you said, but you say that you can visit with him on Zoom now, or did I not get that right?
Yeah, like FaceTime. We will do video calls like here and there on the weekends with our kids, and just to check in and see how he's doing.
So what's that like?
Well, they're difficult because I have two young children and they're sort of wanting that attention. And
oh yeah,
they call him Dedo. That's their grandpa. That's how you say it in Croatian. And they want his attention, and which is actually really nice because I find that, my dad loves seeing them and they connect, and that's so joyous. And but it's also hard to really be able to talk to him, in a way that I can be focused and present when I'm with them. Sure.
Right.
Not easy.
This is probably irrelevant, but this is so similar to what Jill went through with her dad, who was in my college class, but I didn't know him hardly at all at that time. And but yeah, he had pancreatic, I think, cancer, and they knew, he had about 6 months, I guess, or some number of months was all. But he was very involved with the grandchildren. Yeah. And she said when she was growing up, he was always involved with her, and and just into sports and being with the grandkids, and telling her always make sure you give your boys a lot of attention. And it sounds like he was just a very especially toward the latter part of his life, just became very, very focused on kids, on children, and it was, and I think still is, a huge loss for Jill and for her mother who was having a really hard time at first, and I think is doing better now. But I'm so sad. Let me ask you how we're doing so far on empathy in terms of understanding how you're thinking and feeling, as well as providing a sense of, warmth or support or compassion or something like that. Would you be giving us an A, a B, a C, a D? Are there things we're missing? What sounds kind of stupid to ask, but what grade would you be giving us so far?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I feel really warm and connected with the both of you, and I'm really feeling the empathy here, that you're really listening and understanding, and actually the stories that you're sharing, are just very relevant, kind of normalizing this experience that can kind of feel so like alone in your grief at moments, because especially with the pandemic, what you're, day to day going through. And so I give the both of you, A+. I think you're really spot on here. I like the I feel statements. That feels just warm and like you're human beings that are just listening and understanding. Great. So I appreciate that.
Thanks. Can I ask you one more question, Rose, before we move on?
Yeah, please.
What I'm so admiring, and it comes through everything that you're saying about your father's, the closeness that you have with him. You're just everything you say seems to be, an indication of so much love between the two of you. And I'm really admiring that. And wondering if you could say a little bit about your relationship with your dad and what's it like? What has it been like to have him as a dad?
Yeah, it's been, you're right. You had I think are kind of honing in on a really key area. We have a really strong connection and relationship. I think I kind of just take after him genetically, temperament, and in so many ways, much more. And so we've always kind of, I think, I'm the only daughter of 3 children. And so I think there's just a special connection between father and daughter. And, he's instilled so many of my values of like hard work, the work ethic. Family is really an essential value that he's really kind of taught me, and the culture that he shares, like from what his upbringing has been important for me in my life, and the way I kind of raise my kids. And we've had a great relationship, and and especially I think with my dad, I've kind of learned to love the adventure, like you were saying, like it sounds like with Jill's situation, her dad was involved, in her upbringing, and he was always kind of involved with the sports. He loved soccer. We kind of played that. And now my kids do. It's really neat to see it kind of go through the generations, and my son's really good. So we're like, oh yeah, like with soccer, it's almost religious, and the family and the culture. So it's just, we've shared a lot of those things, like the Euro Cups, the World Cups, those kind of, and Croatia was at the World Cup the last time, so there was just so many really, I feel proud of this, connection we have. It's been so beautiful. And my dad, and, my dad's kind of like, when I was in my 20s, I decided I wanted to travel to South America. And my family was like, well, don't go by yourself. You're going to get, something bad's going to happen to you. And so my dad's like, okay, I'll go with you. And so we just did it. We went to Machu Picchu. We climbed that. Like we did some crazy things. I just, we were doing the hosteling, hanging out with people in different countries. And my dad he's really social. And I think that's where I kind of get that piece where we just love being around people and love traveling and just exploring cultures. And, I speak Spanish too. And so I just have always loved learning more about, other people and places. And so we've just had our own adventures, and I'm just so grateful that I've had these experiences with him, which is like, I think when there's moments when I think about the loss, it feels so much more painful, because it's just the facts of like, that won't happen again. Like, this is it.
Oh my gosh, Rose, thinking about you and your dad traveling to South America in your 20s, that just brought tears to my eyes. There's so much, what a beautiful relationship. I can't imagine that. And wow, that's all I guess. It's such a beautiful thing to even imagine that a father and a daughter would be traveling together. Like during a time when a lot of kids are saying, forget my dad, forget my parents, I want to be on my own. Yeah. He embraced him, and he,
yeah.
That's awesome.
We just did it. Yeah, we went to I think 4 or 5 countries. It was just, it was an adventure. Wow. When you go traveling and you always, all these unexpected things, and you just laugh, and it's just, oh my gosh, so fun.
You're lucky to have so much grief.
Mm. Tell me more about that. What do you?
Well, it's just an obvious thing, but it's just an expression of what a loving relationship you had with your dad, and what a wonderful father he's been, and what a wonderful daughter that you've been, and that's what your grief is saying. The option would be to have no grief.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.